one group of people at the expense of another. And here you have to incorporate value judgments, and economic theory in and of itself doesn't provide any guidance of how you should make the change. It could simply tell you these are the consequences of making the change, but it can't give you guidance of whether the change is worthwhile. He talks about the compensation principle, and he argues the case that when benefits are likely to be large for making a change that harms some group in order to benefit another group, if the benefits are large, it's worthwhile to make the change, but then you should definitely compensate the losing parties. If the benefits are likely to be small, then it's better not to make the change. So he's starting out from a welfare economics perspective on this. And his underlying premise throughout the whole discussion is that the intelligent and efficient use of economic resources to satisfy collective needs under socialism is impossible without a system of prices analogous to that of the capitalist system. And I'm quoting him. He says, "Prices furnish the only objective criterion for evaluating the economic needs of the collectivity and for determining the most efficient ways to satisfy them." And then he goes on to identify the conditions that have to obtain in order for an economy to achieve maximum social welfare. And I'll just list them. Individuals must be permitted to dispose of their incomes as they wish, and prices must be free to adjust to bring quantity demanded into line with quantity supplied. Individuals must be free to choose their own occupations, subject to the requirement that they meet the qualifications for the job. Here again, the prices of the productive factors must be established on the basis of the principle that demand equals supply. The techniques of production must be selected with a view to minimizing the total cost of production. And then the final criterion is marginal cost pricing. And he starts early out by saying that the system of private enterprise often fails to secure the employment all of the available quantity of every factor. And cyclical and chronic unemployment is surely the most serious defect of capitalism. He also goes on to mention that these conditions are met only under perfect competition, which almost never exists. And from this he concludes that there's a strong case to be made for the socialization of production. But he's always insisting that you have to make use of the price system to get good allocative outcomes. A well-functioning socialist system has to be grounded in neoclassical value theory. And I'll quote something again from him. "The usual repeated phrases, such as production for consumption and not for profit, or the firm has to be run for the general interest, are completely devoid of meaning where they are not given concrete form in precise, objective, verifiable rules. The capitalist system functions, albeit with many inefficiencies, because those who direct the firm have a precise task to perform, to maximize the firm's profits." It says that a socialist state needs similarly precise tasks for their managers to perform, because otherwise the system will not be able to function at all. If the socialist state, after having socialized its enterprises, offers to the firm's director only a vague ethical principle to guide his actions, the economic machine will either function in a very arbitrary manner or it won't function at all. It's the merit of economic theory to show how these nebulous slogans, the firm must be run for the general interest, how these nebulous focused slogans can be translated into concrete principles and rules of action. And then what he does in the paper is he sets out a set of institutions and rules to organize the socialist system in order to maximize collective well-being. He discusses a wide range of issues, and he discusses them in fuller detail than almost any of his predecessors. Abba Lerner, maybe in the Economics of Control, goes into comparable detail. But he talks about the tasks that firm managers must be assigned under socialism. He talks about income distribution and the question of how to minimize inequality without losing the efficiency gains that emerge when pay differentials channel labor into lines that have the greatest value to society. He talks about the socialization of investment decisions and what criteria should guide those decisions. He talks about setting up ministries that would promote innovation and technical progress so that you have a mechanism for rewarding innovation. He talks about the relationship between socialism as he envisions it and the Soviet Union's system of communism, which he disliked immensely. He deemed it an absolute failure. And he talks about the implications of Keynes's economics for socialist economies and the budgetary and financial dimensions of the socialist state. Let me wrap this up because I just wanted to give you a flavor of what that article is about without going into the technicalities of his argument. In his 2001 autobiography, Modigliani does mention this article, and he tries to distance himself from it. He again emphasizes the role that he assigns to the price system. And whereas in his 1947 paper, he draws a sharp distinction between socialism and Soviet-style communism, in his autobiography, he kind of conflates the two. He doesn't draw that distinction. And he describes the 1947 paper as an exercise in forcing myself to imagine how production was run efficiently in a socialist economy and how it handled the absence of the market so as to achieve the desired result. So he cast this paper as kind of an intellectual exercise, not something that he was seriously trying to put forward. This is a misrepresentation of that paper. In 1947, he says that he's going to show not just that the system could in principle work, but that we should expect it to work much better than a private enterprise economy. And what he kind of tries to do is dismiss that paper as a youthful indiscretion, I guess, is one way to put it. I think we should not discount the fact that the paper appeared just when the persecution of leftists had begun to gather momentum in the United States. And by that time, Modigliani had decided to make his career in the U.S., and he almost certainly realized that pursuing that line of work would not have been a good career move at the time. By the time it was safe, once again, to explore that line of inquiry, it was 2 decades later, and Modigliani had moved on to other issues. So here are my concluding remarks. Mainstream Keynesianism, one of the reasons I'm interested in this link between Keynesianism and socialism is partly because I'm interested in how non-mainstream economists engage with or fail to engage with or are unable to engage with mainstream economists. It seems that over the past 20 years it has become much more difficult for non-mainstream economists to engage with the mainstream. And that is partly because the mainstream doesn't want to engage in conversations with us. We've seen that there are now real language barriers in the sense that the tools that they use are so different from the tools that non-mainstream economists use that you cannot really have easily have a fruitful conversation. It was not always the case. Certainly in the 40s and the 50s, it was entirely possible for Keynesians and non-mainstream economists to, mainstream Keynesians and non-mainstream economists to engage in dialogue. Mainstream Keynesianism experienced a golden age in those 2 decades after the Second World War. And it's kind of paradoxical